Hello. Today I'm going to tell you about a shocking tragedy that shook all of Australia. A dark and painful story hidden deep within a quiet rural farm. A woman's lifeless, naked body was found lying silently on the green grass. Her body was covered in wounds, and blood had stained the surrounding area red. But what was even more terrifying was the look in her eyes. Wide open, frozen in the final moment of pure fear and despair. When the police arrived at the scene, even the most experienced officers couldn't bear to look. They turned away from the horrifying sight. This case was described by judges at the time as one of the most brutal and savage murders in Australian history. Public outrage reached a boiling point. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse demanding the return of the death penalty to punish those heartless monsters. So, what really happened? Let's turn back time to 1986 to uncover the heartbreaking tragedy that shook the entire country. Blacktown is a town located in the northeastern part of New South Wales, Australia. It's known for its mild climate and beautiful scenery, making it a great destination for family trips. It's also a multicultural city, home to residents from all over the world, speaking more than 60 different languages, creating a truly diverse community. However, between the 1980s and 1990s, Blacktown became a hotspot for crime, gangs took over, drug trafficking was rampant, and violence occurred regularly, putting the area on the police's watch list. The story we're going to dive into today happened right in Blacktown during this dark period. The main character of this case was Anita Cobby, a 26-year-old nurse. She was cheerful, friendly, beautiful, had a graceful figure, and had even won a local beauty pageant title. At that time, Anita was working at Redmond Hospital. On February 3rd, 1986, it started as a normal day. Anita was known for being punctual, but that day she didn't show up to work. She wasn't answering her phone either. Lynn, her close friend and colleague, felt uneasy and called Anita's parents, only to find out that Anita hadn't come home the night before. Lynn remembered clearly that the evening before, after finishing work at 3:30 p.m., she, Anita, and some friends had gone to a nearby restaurant. They laughed, talked, and shared 2 bottles of wine, staying out until around 8:30 p.m. Since Anita's home in Blacktown was far from downtown, Lynn drove her to Central Station in Sydney so she could catch the 9:12 p.m. train. Anita planned to call her father from a public phone once she arrived in Blacktown so he could come pick her up. But when Lynn contacted Anita's family, she was shocked to hear that Anita never called and never came home. Anita's father, Mr. Lynn, was deeply worried. At first, he thought maybe his daughter had stayed at a friend's house since the gathering ended late. But as more time passed, it became clear Anita was missing. Mr. Lynn began contacting friends and searching all over Blacktown in the Sydney area, but there was no trace of her. Finally, at 6:30 p.m., he had no choice but to report her missing to the police. The police launched an immediate search, but it was as if Anita had vanished into thin air, leaving behind no clues. Based on their experience with similar missing person cases, especially involving women, the police suspected that someone Anita knew might have harmed her. They began investigating her social circle and background, hoping for a lead. Anita was born on November 2nd, 1959 in Blacktown. Her father, Mr. Lynn, was a graphic designer for the military, and her mother was an excellent nurse. She grew up with her younger sister. Both girls were smart and loved sports, especially surfing. Anita had always stood out. As a child, she looked like a living doll, cute and charming. As she grew up, she became even more beautiful, with delicate features and a tall, graceful figure, rivaling that of movie stars. In 1979, she won a regional beauty contest. With her looks and talent, Anita could have easily pursued a career in entertainment, but she had different dreams. She didn't want to rely on her appearance alone to succeed in life. She wanted to do something meaningful. So she followed in her mother's footsteps and became a nurse at Westmead Hospital. It was there that she met John, her boyfriend. John was born in 1956, 3 years older than Anita. He had a handsome appearance, with deep blue eyes, shiny blonde hair, and a cheerful, outgoing personality. He was always the funny guy in his group of friends. John had a diverse background. He'd done all kinds of jobs, from laundry and dishwashing to being a security guard. Every time he saved up some money, he'd go surfing and travel, living a carefree and adventurous life. But after a while, maybe he had enough of that lifestyle. He wanted to settle down, so he enrolled in a nursing course at Grant Mid Hospital. That's where he met Anita. John fell in love with her at first sight. However, Anita's radiant beauty made him feel insecure, so he only admired her from afar and didn't dare talk to her. But fate can be full of surprises. Anita noticed the cheerful guy who was always smiling and was drawn to his sense of humor and energy. She made the first move and introduced herself. Their first date was at a Lebanese restaurant near the hospital. After just one meal, they already had feelings for each other. From then on, they often met up, talked, and their relationship quickly blossomed. Eventually, they officially became a couple. After more than a year of dating, John finally gathered the courage to propose, and Anita said yes without hesitation. On March 27, 1982, the beautiful couple got married, surrounded by the blessings and admiration of friends and family. Everyone said they were a perfect match. Their married life was sweet and full of happiness. Although Anita sadly had a miscarriage, they didn't let sorrow consume them. They remained hopeful for the future. They adopted 2 adorable puppies, often went out for dinner, enjoyed concerts together, and even bought a small boat to prepare for trips. In 1984, through a friend's introduction, John started working as a horse trainer. A year later, he got lucky and won 10,000 Australian dollars by betting on a horse race. Back then, that was a huge amount of money. With the surprise windfall, the couple was able to fulfill their dream of traveling around the world and had an amazing time. In 1985, after spending all the money, they returned to Sydney and resumed their normal life. However, that's when their problems started. John wanted to settle down, buy a house, and have kids. But Anita, still in her 20s, felt like her life was just beginning. She had many dreams, like pursuing higher education, learning Spanish, traveling, and more. The differences between them grew, leading to constant arguments. Eventually, at the start of 1986, they decided to separate. Anita moved back to Blacktown to live with her parents, and John moved in with his own. After calming down, they agreed to meet and talk things through. On February 1st, 1986, they saw each other again after a time apart. They listened, understood each other better, and decided to work things out together, willing to compromise and heal their relationship. That night, Anita came to John's house for dinner to discuss buying a home. They also planned to attend John's sister's birthday party a few days later. But just when it seemed like everything was getting back on track, Anita suddenly disappeared without a trace. What made it even more suspicious was John's reaction to her disappearance. Instead of searching for her, he brought a bottle of whiskey to her father's house. Mr. Lynn, Anita's father, had already disapproved of John since the separation. Now, seeing him bring alcohol while his daughter was missing, he was furious and shouted at John. John said nothing, turned around, and went home to sleep. At this point, many people's first reaction would be, "It's obvious he's the killer." The police thought the same. They considered John the prime suspect and brought him in for questioning. But then, an unexpected report turned the investigation upside down. At Prospect Paddock, a field south of Blacktown, a farmer noticed his cows gathering around something in a corner of the field and refusing to leave. Out of curiosity, he went to check and saw a horrifying sight that he would never forget. Lying face down on the grass was a naked woman's body, covered in blood, with barely any skin intact. Shocked, the farmer immediately called the police. A large number of officers quickly arrived at the scene. The forensic team found multiple injuries and signs of assault. Even more heartbreaking, the woman's eyes were still wide open, as if her pain and despair were frozen in that moment. The forensic report revealed that her throat had been slashed, and she survived for about 2 minutes after the cut. 2 minutes of sheer torture. At the time, the only woman reported missing in the area was Anita, so the police removed a gold ring from the victim's finger and brought it to her family for identification. When John saw the ring, he collapsed to the ground in tears. It was the wedding ring he had picked out for Anita himself. Next, Mr. Lynn came to identify the body. His hands shaking, he lifted the white cloth. The sight of his daughter's badly injured body made him faint. When he regained consciousness, he sobbed, "That's Anita, my daughter." At just 26 years old, full of life, Anita had endured unimaginable pain in her final moments. The police, too, were horrified by the brutality of the crime. Many officers quietly swore they would catch the killer and make him pay for what he did. The first step in the investigation was questioning John, the main suspect. In the interrogation room, John appeared panicked and vacant. The police pressed him. "Admit it, you killed Anita." At first he denied it, but under increasing pressure, he eventually broke down, cried, and confessed, "Yes, it was me." But the fact that they got a confession so easily only made the police more suspicious. Moreover, John's mental state was clearly unstable, so his statements couldn't be fully trusted. The police later spoke with John's friends, all of whom said that he truly loved Anita. Even after they separated, he still cared about her. They believed John could never have killed his wife. The forensic report on Phoebe later completely dismissed the police's theory. The wounds on Anita's body suggested that the attack wasn't carried out by just one person, but by a group. Her estimated time of death was between the night of the 2nd and the early morning of the 3rd. During this time, John was at his mother's house and had no opportunity to commit the crime. It was clear that the police had arrested the wrong person. John was innocent. The police returned to the grassy field and asked the farmer if he had heard anything unusual on the night of the 2nd. The farmer recalled hearing a woman screaming in the nearby field, but he thought it was just a couple arguing, so he didn't pay much attention. The police determined that the grassy field was the primary crime scene, but strangely, after a thorough search, they didn't find any useful clues. So they shifted their investigation to the last known location where Anita might have been seen. Blacktown train station. A female officer dressed similarly to Anita, named Kimmett, took the 9:12 p.m. train from Sydney to Blacktown. Along the way, she showed Anita's photo to each passenger, but unfortunately, no one had any helpful information. In addition, the police discovered that all the public payphones at the Blacktown station were broken. This explained why Anita hadn't called her father that night. Based on these clues, the police proposed a bold theory. Around 9:40 p.m. on the 2nd, after getting off the train, Anita likely tried to contact her family but couldn't find a working phone or a taxi. So she may have decided to walk home, and something may have happened to her along the way. The police started investigating along Anita's usual walking route home. However, there were no surveillance cameras in the area at the time, so they focused on checking criminal records, especially for people with histories of sexual assault or violence. But they still couldn't find any major breakthroughs, and the case began to stall. Then in the early morning of February 5th, while reviewing past incident reports, a police officer came across an extremely important detail. On the night Anita went missing, along the road she usually took home, a young boy had reported witnessing a kidnapping. That night, he and his sister heard screaming and saw, through the window, a girl being dragged into a dirty white car with a gray undercoat. The boy ran outside, but the car sped off. The siblings reported the incident to the police. Later, their neighbor Paul heard about it when he got home and immediately drove around with his girlfriend to look for the white car. They found a car matching the description near the grassy field, but no one was inside and nothing seemed unusual at the field, so they returned home. A 16-year-old teenager also reported that around 9:45 p.m. that night, he heard a woman scream for about 30 seconds. He ran outside and saw a white car driving away without headlights. Through the rear window, he saw two men restraining a struggling woman. The police had received these reports that night and even sent officers to search the nearby area, but they hadn't found anything. However, with these new leads, they believed the woman being kidnapped was likely Anita. They launched a citywide search for the white car. But just as everyone was busy with the investigation, another complication arose. At 9 a.m. on February 7, 1986, Rose, a host of an Australian TV program, unexpectedly read out Anita's autopsy report live on air, including disturbing details. He said that after reading it, he was furious and felt the public had a right to know. So he broadcasted the contents without permission. The program caused a nationwide uproar. The police department was flooded with phone calls. People were both outraged by the leak of the autopsy report and horrified by the brutal nature of the crime. For the police, it was a disaster. The case was now public knowledge, making it much harder to investigate. An internal investigation was launched, but they couldn't trace the source of the leak. Still, it unexpectedly helped a little. People across Australia began to actively provide information and even donate money to support the investigation. The New South Wales government offered a 50,000 Australian dollar reward for any useful information. On February 10, 1986, Anita's family held her funeral. Many people showed up to say goodbye to the young woman. The most devastated person at the funeral was John, who had earlier falsely confessed. During the ceremony, he suddenly lost control, screaming, "Don't take her away! Please don't take her away!" in a voice full of grief and desperation. Eventually, some people had to pull him away. After Anita's death, John completely broke down. He drowned himself in alcohol, living day by day in despair, even hoping he might one day die from alcohol poisoning just to be with Anita. It was clear he truly loved her, and his earlier confession was just the result of overwhelming grief. That funeral wasn't just a farewell, it was also a wake-up call for all of Australia. The public's anger and concern put huge pressure on the police. Fortunately, the very next day, there was a major breakthrough. While reviewing records, the police noticed that on February 2nd, the day Anita was kidnapped, there had been a report of a stolen white car matching the suspect vehicle in the case. From this clue, they quickly identified three men, John Travers, Michael Murdoch, and Leslie Murphy. All three were already known to police. Travers, in particular, was very familiar to them. His background was textbook criminal, an alcoholic, gambling, an abusive father who used drugs, and a sickly mother who couldn't control her kids. Travers' biggest hobby was torturing animals, even sexually abusing them. Many had witnessed him do unspeakable things to sheep, pigs, and chickens. He was also a sexual predator, known for threatening women and weak-looking men with knives at train stations or in public restrooms. Even though he was only 18, he had already been involved in at least 12 assaults, a real monster. The other two weren't much better. Murdoch, 18, was Travers' loyal sidekick, constantly drinking, stealing, and getting into fights. Leslie, 22, had a hot temper, loved starting trouble, and had been arrested multiple times for theft. All three had criminal records and had just stolen a white car, so the police quickly considered them the main suspects and arrested them. During separate interrogations, the police didn't immediately mention Anita's case, only asking about the stolen car. Murdoch and Leslie were calm and answered clearly without slipping up. But Travers was different. Whether from nerves or sheer stupidity, he blurted out, "I didn't slit her throat." That statement was basically a confession, because the police had never mentioned that Anita's throat had been cut. Travers was arrested immediately. Murdoch and Leslie were temporarily released but kept under surveillance. On February 22, 1986, Travers had a cigarette craving in jail and asked the police to contact his girlfriend, Catherine, to bring him some. The police agreed and also asked Catherine to help gather evidence. She agreed. Wearing a hidden recorder, Catherine met with Travers. He wasn't suspicious at all. Instead, he boasted about the crime and even laughed while describing what they did to Anita. He revealed that, in addition to himself, Murdoch, and Leslie, two more men were involved, Leslie's brothers, Michael Murphy and Gary Murphy. After going over the gruesome details, Travers tried to convince Catherine to help destroy the weapons, clothes, and the white car. Even worse, he said he had a plan to escape from prison. He wanted Catherine to sabotage the train tracks so a train would crash into the jail, and he could use the chaos to escape. If that didn't work, he'd ask Murdoch and Leslie to smuggle explosives into his meals. Whether from arrogance or delusion, he truly believed these were brilliant plans. Police later sent Catherine, again wired, to visit Murdoch. From him, they got even more details. With the recordings in hand, they located the murder weapon, the clothing, and the white car. They continued their investigation on the other suspects. Michael, 33 years old, was the oldest of 9 children. He had previously been sentenced to 25 years for repeated break-ins and had successfully escaped prison. He was still on the run. Gary, 28 years old, suffered from a personality disorder. To his friends, he seemed like an honest, hard-working man, but in reality, he had been arrested several times for car theft. Once police had enough witnesses, physical evidence, and confessions, they arrested the remaining 4 suspects. From the moment Anita was murdered to the day all suspects were caught, it only took the Australian police 22 days. Their efficiency was impressive. The shocking case that had gripped the Australian public was finally solved. One notable moment was when police raided Gary's home. He was so terrified he wet himself. During the interrogation, based on Lynn's testimony, one of the suspects, police were able to piece together the full sequence of events. On the night of February 2nd, 1986, 5 drunk men were driving around aimlessly when they spotted Anita, a young, beautiful woman walking alone. Driven by lust, they overpowered her, forced her into the car, and quickly left the scene. Inside the cramped car, the 5 young men sexually assaulted and beat Anita. She fought back desperately, pleading, "Please, don't do this. I'm married. I'm also on my period. Please let me go." But her begging only made them more violent. Shavers even pressed a knife to her neck and threatened, "Shut up, or I'll kill you." Along the way, they used Anita's money to buy gas, then drove to a field in the south. They dragged Anita, now barely conscious, out of the car, pulled her across a barbed wire fence, and threw her on the ground. They continued torturing her. Just then, a car approached. 2 people got out with flashlights, and the attackers quickly dropped to the ground and covered Anita's mouth. It was Poe and his girlfriend, the same people mentioned earlier. They were just a few steps away from Anita. If they had walked just a bit farther, they would have seen her. Sadly, the darkness hid everything. They missed the one chance to save her. Some believe even if they had found Anita, it might not have changed the outcome. They could have been harmed too. The torture lasted at least an hour. Once Murdoch sobered up, he started panicking and said, "She saw our faces and heard our names. We can't let her live." They all agreed she had to die, but no one wanted to be the one to do it. Eventually, Travers took a knife and slit Anita's throat. After killing her, they quickly left the scene and burned the clothes they had worn. But Travers kept a pair of jeans as a souvenir, not realizing it would become key evidence that would lead to his conviction. On March 16, 1987, the trial, dubbed the trial of the century by the media, officially began. The 5 suspects were taken to court under the intense outrage of the public. Outside the courthouse, a huge crowd gathered, holding signs showing their anger. Some even hung dummies in trees as a protest, calling for the return of the death penalty to punish such monsters. The 5 criminals faced over 50 charges, including kidnapping, theft, robbery, escape from custody, sexual assault, and murder. But they refused to take responsibility, doing everything they could to avoid punishment. The 4 other suspects tried to blame Anita's murder on Travers, hoping to reduce their own sentences. Murdoch's lawyer argued that media coverage had unfairly influenced the jury and asked for a delay. Gary's lawyer claimed his client had a low IQ and couldn't tell right from wrong, so he shouldn't be held accountable. But the overwhelming evidence made these arguments useless. On June 10, 1987, after 54 days of trial, all 5 were found guilty of rape and murder. On June 16th, the New South Wales Supreme Court sentenced all of them to life in prison without parole. Since Australia had already abolished the death penalty, this was the harshest possible sentence at the time. The case that had shocked and enraged the country finally came to a close. In court, Judge Island was visibly emotional, saying through tears, "This is one of the most horrific cases of sexual violence I've ever seen." The prosecutor bluntly stated, "The murder of Anita is one of the most brutal and savage crimes in history." Even though the 5 killers received the punishment they deserved, for Anita's family, the nightmare wasn't over. John, Anita's husband, sank into grief and heroin addiction. His life fell apart. Thankfully, time helped heal his wounds. He started visiting the church, quietly sitting by Anita's grave and whispering to her. Years later, John found the courage to marry again, have children, and start a new life. But he changed his name to escape the past. Only when his son grew up did John realize that changing his name couldn't erase the pain. With his son's support, he finally took back his real name and chose to face the past. Anita's parents never truly recovered either, but they turned their grief into action. Together with the family of another murder victim, they founded HOMS, the Homicide Victim Support Group, which provides psychological support to the families of victims. They help families in pain move forward and rebuild their lives. Later, this organization partnered with the government and raised 9.4 million Australian dollars to build Grace's Place, a support center for children, teenagers, and their families who lost loved ones to murder, offering them warmth and comfort during their darkest days. As for the 5 killers who escaped the death penalty, they faced endless suffering behind bars. Travers, since being convicted, was moved between multiple prisons. In 1996, he tried to escape with another inmate by sawing through a window with a metal rod, but failed. After that, he was watched more closely. Michael was diagnosed with liver cancer while in prison and died on February 21, 2019. Gary was brutally beaten in prison because of the Anita case. On June 25, 2019, he was attacked by a group of inmates in the prison's carpentry workshop, suffering serious head injuries, and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The other 2 criminals were also shunned behind bars, living unstable lives, moving from place to place. What they endured may have been the most fitting punishment of all. The Anita Cobby case left a deep scar in Australian society. It inspired films, true crime documentaries, and left a lasting impact in media. To honor Anita's memory, authorities named a park in Blacktown after her, so people would forever remember the life of this young woman whose future was stolen. We hope tragedies like this never happen again. That's the end of today's video. See you in the next one. Goodbye.